News about child abductions have become more frequent in my country, so this has led to an old encounter my mum reminded me of from when I was a wee lass. Also, sorry for the long post. This happened when I was about 5 or 6 years old. My mother was a dealer for Coca-Cola at the time in a rural region of my city. So that means she and her fellow employees would be delivering crates of Coke to little villages in the boonies regularly. On this particular day, no deliveries were scheduled, and anything that was to be delivered was done, so we were all hanging out at the warehouse. My mum figured since it was the end of the week, let's all go on a little road trip with the crew. Everyone agreed, and one of the crew suggested we go see this new island resort a couple of towns over. It was nothing fancy, just a large area with a few pools, a pond where you can catch your own fish for meals, and bamboo huts along the side. We all get in the truck and off we go. We arrive sometime in the early afternoon, and Mum is telling members of the crew what to do. One books a hut, one gets our stuff in order, and someone to keep an eye on me. While I did look around a little bit, I never wandered too far. I see this old lady, maybe in her 40s or 50s, and she's looking at me. I was a friendly kid, so I waved and smiled. She just stared at me, so I told the crew member who was looking after me, who in turn told my mum. She told everyone to keep an eye on her and make sure that someone always has their eyes on me. We proceed in the merrymaking. I'm swimming in the pool, and Mum and a crew member are having a few drinks and eating catfish. This dragged on till maybe 6 to 7 p.m. I stayed in the pool majority of the time and would just come out for a bite or a drink of soda, but my last attempt to jump in, I see from the far end of the pool the same old lady. I immediately tell my mum, who looks at her in her direction and tells everyone that we're packing up and to go back to the warehouse. We get back and Mum requests that 3 of the guys stay the night at the old house, and if they could just stay up one at a time just to be safe. Sometime in the middle of the night, I get woken up by my mum, telling me to be quiet and to follow her into one of the bedrooms in the back and to leave my slippers on so we don't make a noise. I ask her why, and she pointed outside on the other side of the gate was the same lady. She insists I go to one of the rooms in the back of the house and stay there until she gets me. I followed, then hear her wake up the crew, and I hear them leave the house and confront the old lady by the gate with questions like, "Who are you? What do you want? How did you follow us?" But Mum said she just glared at them while mumbling, and now and then would crane her neck, looking past them as if to look for someone. She eventually leaves, and in the morning I'm taken back to the city to my actual house while my mum went back to town to continue her job and inform the local authorities of the lady. I never saw the old lady again, and it's been about 20 years. Update. So I asked my mum about the old lady again and whatever happened to her report. She said that she and the 3 crew members that confronted her went straight into town to the hall before they started work. It's a small town, so it wasn't that hard to find someone via description, and they did find out who she was. Local authorities went to this little bamboo hut on the edge of town, about a mile into some of the wooded area. The plan was just to give her a warning, but when they got to her hut, nobody was in. They checked the windows, but nobody was inside or around the area. Someone did live there, because there were ducks and chickens and all in a small pen outside of the house. They decided to just leave and update Mum later in the afternoon. Nothing really came of it though. There was no updates. They never saw anyone at that house again. So creepy lady at the pool, we haven't met so far, and let's not ever meet again. Back in 2011, I was 21 years old, fresh out of university, living in the capital of the Philippines, Manila, for some months. I interned at a place building NGO while also playing semi-professional football, soccer, in the country's national league. A strange combo, but both roles are relative to the story. My experience starts on one rainy Saturday afternoon in November. Football was cancelled with waterlogged pitch, but already down on my way to training, I decided to visit a fruit market instead, one listed in my Lonely Planet guide. For those who don't know, Lonely Planet was the original Google Maps, at least in Manila. I must have looked lost as two Filipino women, one middle-aged and one early 20s, approached me from behind, raising their umbrella over my head and asking where I was heading. After some friendly chit-chat, it came to pass, without any prompting, I add, that they had lived in the same neighbourhood that I was from in London, England, a strange coincidence, and one that lowered my guard. They offered to take me to a better fruit market, one that required a taxi to reach. Naive, trusting, and nervous about offending, I got into this taxi, leading me through the winding maze-like back streets of the Manila slum. We exit, and I'm utterly lost in an unfamiliar part of this sprawling city. Remember, this is pre-Google Maps and ride-sharing apps, leaving me at the mercy of these women. With no fruit market in sight, they plead with me to come into their nondescript low-rise home for food and drink. My youthful, naive, and reluctance to offend once again get the better of me. Whether due to trauma or time, I really can't remember what the inside of the place looked like. But I remember it was dingy, had a TV with a karaoke hooked in, and there was a man waiting when we arrived. Realizing what a sketchy situation I was in, I was conscious of anything they gave me to drink, watching them open the beer bottles in front of me. A couple of drinks in, the karaoke was flowing. I felt fine, but deeply uncomfortable, vulnerable and trapped, and was waiting for the opportunity to leave. A tray of barbecue meat was brought out, always associated drugging with drink, not food. I had very little concern over eating it. The naivety of this would become instantly apparent. Putting this pork into my mouth, it had a strange medicinal flavor, but it would be too late before I connected the dots. My final memory that day was the young woman uncomfortably close to me, holding a microphone and flirtatiously singing the chorus of Hey Jude by the Beatles. While I drifted off, unable to keep my eyes open, I have virtually no memory of the next 24 hours of my life. I would wake up in a darkened room in the middle of the night, 1,000 kilometers south of Manila in a city called Davao. To be clear, this Davao trip was one that I had previously scheduled for work, leaving the day after this incident. Still, to this day, all I remember of the journey is waking up and the sounds of sitting in a taxi on my way to the airport. I passed through customs, boarded a gate, collected my baggage, met my colleagues, and was driven to our office apartment, with zero memory of doing any of this. My colleagues didn't suspect anything was wrong with me, mentioning later that I just seemed tired. It took some hours after waking up to piece together where I was and what had occurred. $200 had been withdrawn from my bank account, but I still had my wallet and phone. While I can't be certain, I concluded that I had been fed a drug popular in the Philippines called Atavan. I read similar stories of people being spiked, functioning relatively normal, becoming palatable, but having no memory of the incident. This would explain how I withdrew $200 while seemingly unconscious. To this day, I feel deeply uncomfortable at what may have occurred after I passed out, particularly with the behavior from the younger woman towards me just before passing out. But those 24 hours of my life are gone, and I'll never know exactly what happened. So, to the 2 women in Manila who drugged and robbed me, let's not meet. I was 14 years old when I had to live with my grandparents. I had to live with them because my sister was in college and my parents were divorced. They lived in this old bungalow-type house. It was a 1-story, and we have stairs that immediately goes up to the attic. The attic, which no one ever really uses. We just put stuff in there. It's for storage, really. It's too hot and stuffy up there. The sole window up there didn't really help. The attic had old, creaky wooden floors that I remember that I have to polish with coconut shells because that's how we do it here in the Philippines. And my grandparents are very traditional. Anyways, a door room was near the stairs leading up to the attic. Like you open my door, then face right, and the stairs would be immediately right there. I hated that every time I left my room because I would expect that something would be immediately crawling down from the attic. One night my grandparents had to pick up my aunt's family from the airport, but because of hellish traffic there, they had to leave at 7 p.m. and their expected time of arrival back home would be 5 a.m. So a 14-year-old girl would be alone at home this whole time. I told them I would be safe here. We live in a gated community. We got tons of guard dogs. Everything would be okay, or so I thought. Before they left, we already had dinner, so I just stuck with cleaning the dishes and all. As I was doing that, I could hear a bunch of neighborhood dogs bark a lot. I didn't really think much of it because the dogs always do that. When I finished cleaning up for dinner, I immediately had to lock every door and window and close the lights before heading to bed. When I entered my room, the lights were open and it looked normal. My anime posters were on the wall, my closet was untouched, my bed was next to my barred tinted windows. We had to tint them because it was on the first floor, and my grandparents wanted to make sure no one would peep in a young girl's room. They were barred too because my uncle, who used to use the room, always escaped through there to go to parties. This was my grandparents' solution to that. Nothing was out of place to alarm me. Everything was normal until I closed the lights. As soon as I closed my lights, a silhouette of a man was illuminated by the street lights outside. He looked like he had a thick head of curly hair, and he was a skinny build. I thought I was having hallucinations, so I opened the light again, and he was gone. I closed it again, and he was back again. Open, gone. Closed, gone. I sighed in relief. I was just tricking myself, I guess. Or something else was casting the shadow. I double-locked my door just to be safe. one with the doorknob lock and one of those door latching type of locks, then tucked myself in. It was hard to fall asleep when a lot of guard dogs outside are barking. They weren't our dogs, they were the neighbors. But finally I was falling asleep when I heard something from above me, something in the attic. I pushed down the thought, I'm tricking myself again. I hugged my pillow. It's just rats, I said to myself. These rats seemed heavy and were also pushing furniture around. My heart sunk when I heard them hurry down the stairs and then stop at the bottom. I covered myself with a blanket and waited for something. I was also wishing that my parents given me a phone at the time like this, but I only waited on bated breath. Suddenly I heard my doorknob being gently fiddled. I wanted to vomit when I heard a click, followed it by a quiet turn of the knob. The knob turned, but it didn't budge. When they noticed, they tried to push it. This time I had finally stood up, shaking. I was a kid, home alone with no phone, no means of defense. All that was keeping me safe was this thick door from the old days. I softly pushed my body up against the door and locked everything up again. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want him to know that I was here. I don't know why he stopped, but he did. I didn't go back to my bed. I just sat there, at the door, waiting. It felt like forever. I heard footsteps go up the stairs, but I still sat there. I saw something move in the corner of my eye. There, at the window, the shadow was back. I forced myself not to look. All I could think was thank God those windows were barred. I don't remember what happened after that. I think I fell asleep or was too scared to even think straight. I just remember the next day when my family and I were finally having breakfast. I casually brought it up. Lo, I think I heard footsteps in the attic last night. My grandfather scoffed. It's probably rats, he said. I never brought it up again. I didn't want them to worry. I probably was just hearing the rats. But I do know this. Our dogs were caged up near the gate and were far from my room, so they wouldn't have seen anything. The only dogs that were near my room were my neighbors. Also, there was nothing outside of my window that could cast a shadow that looked like a man. And the final part. My attic window was open. So, attic rats. It's not meat again. This happened 2 years ago. I was still living in a small apartment with my two older sisters. We're all in our early 20s, in a shady area in the city here in the Philippines. And by shady, I mean neighbors who use drugs, gangsters roaming around like they own the streets, riots in the middle of the night. Yeah, you get the picture. I know this isn't a good place for three girls to live in, but we really don't have a choice since the rent is really cheap and our money is tight. So on to the story. My sisters were already sleeping that night, and I was still up studying for the upcoming finals when our landline suddenly rang. I was kind of annoyed more than puzzled as to why on earth someone's still calling in the middle of the night. I didn't move to answer the call and just focused harder on what I was reading. The caller hung up. For like 5 rings, they tried and called again. It was already hard to focus at that time because the ring was already getting into my head, so I promised myself to answer the next call. So when they rang the phone again, I answered it immediately. I asked who the caller was, but there was no answer. All I could hear was heavy breathing and random noises on some street. I shrugged it off, hung up, and went back to study. The call stopped, and for once I could finally study in peace. After several minutes I got sleepy and prepared to go to bed when the phone frickin' rang again. I ignored it and continued cleaning up my stuff. The call went to voicemail, and the caller left a message. Look outside. I'm outside your door. I'm outside as I speak to you right now. Just take a look at me outside. And then he ended the call. The voice was breathy, but it was obvious this caller was a guy. He uttered those words with a sing-songy voice like he was a maniac on the loose. I was creeped the fuck out, nevertheless. I woke up my sisters and told them what happened. We were all freaked out. We don't know what to do since there isn't a 911 hotline here in the Philippines that you can call any time, nor a team of policemen that would respond immediately. So we just secured the locks and stayed awake together all night, holding one another with knives in our hands. Fortunately, nothing terrible happened, and after the creeper didn't call again, but that was enough to make us move the hell out of that place. I will never go jogging in the fog again. Okay, this is my first post on the subreddit and I'm kinda hyped. I am a 17-year-old high school guy with a weak body. I live in a small town in the Philippines, and this town is surrounded by a rice field, with a highway going straight across it. I hope you get what I'm saying. Part of my usual weekend routine is to go jogging early in the morning, sometimes around 5 a.m. My usual jogging route is from my house, somewhere in the middle of town, to a small hill with a wonderful view of the town in the morning. To reach my destination, I would have to jog on the side of the highway. From time to time, a fog that lasts an hour would appear in the highway, and once you're inside, you could only see 10 to 15 feet before it goes white. So one Saturday I decided to jog. I invited my friend, same age as me, to join me since he follows the same route anyway. We left at 5 a.m. and proceeded to the highway. As usual, a thick fog blanketed the highway. The cars that would pass by with their lights on, there were several one-ways because of a road repair. My country is currently issuing a nationwide widening of national roads. As we entered into the fog, we decided to jog along the side of the road and pass a couple roadworks about 100 meters long each. All was well at that point. A bit exhausted, but otherwise fine. We barely encountered anyone else, and usually they are just fellow joggers too. That hill with the view is really famous. When we came across another roadwork, it wasn't that far from the hill, and we saw this guy crouched down in the asphalt. He was wearing a dirty orange vest and similarly dirty hard hat. We couldn't see his face, but we just decided to ignore it. He looked as if he was fidgeting with something in his hands, so we thought he was just holding a few tools or something. Also, there was nobody there but us, me, my friend, and that guy. The fog was still thick as heck. My friend signaled me to keep a distance from the guy, and I followed him. When we got closer, we heard him humming a strange tune under his breath, which in itself wasn't weird, but boy, were we wrong. As we got closer and closer to the guy, he started acting erratically. He stopped for a moment as I passed him. Then he started laughing. It wasn't a regular laugh, it sounded sinister and a little dry. It was really loud too. It was so frickin' loud. We didn't increase our speed at this point, as we thought he was just toying with us. But he didn't stop. He just kept laughing and laughing, and we knew it was beyond a prank. I can't describe his laugh more than I just did, but trust me, he wasn't faking it. We didn't look back. We were speeding up now as we were starting to see the hill. I was gasping for air, but I didn't know what would happen if I stopped. I just forced myself to keep running and running, and my friend did the same. He was probably 50 meters behind us when I decided to look at him. He had stopped laughing, but now he was standing straight up and was glaring at us. He called out to us in my language, in an enraged tone. That's when adrenaline kicked in. I just ran and ran until we reached the hill. In hindsight, I don't know how I was able to push myself that far for so long. When we finally arrived at the top of the hill, we were exhausted. I nearly collapsed on the cement bench and stayed there for another hour. Like a breath of fresh air, my friend laughed in a more comedic manner, and I followed suit. We laughed the whole thing off while waiting for the fog to lift. When it did, we walked home. I hadn't had breakfast yet, so I was pretty hungry, and we passed the roadworks where we saw the guy. He was no longer there. The only people there were the ones wearing construction suits, and the ones who were signaling traffic, but none of them looked like the man that we saw. As I got home, I told my parents what had happened, and they said it was probably just another nut job, which we find to be quite common in my town, that stole a construction outfit. Since then, I never went jogging in the fog again. Thank you for reading, and highway guy, let's not meet ever again. Hello everyone, Grimm here, and as always, thank you to everyone who made it to the end of this video. This is the third day of encounters from the Philippines. I'll be doing 2 more encounter-like stories, and then I'll be doing a story written in the Philippines. Now, it may only be 1 more and that story, but we'll have a look and see how I get on. But anyway, as normal, let's do a random word. How about we do cacti? So, C-A-C-T-I, meaning multiple cactus. Put it in the comment as a sentence or as a singular word. It's really up to you. But hey, I've had a bit of fun reading these. I hope you've enjoyed listening. I'm gonna drop off now so as not to drag this out too long. But you know the story, right? The usual drill. Be safe wherever you are. Have an amazing night or day. And as always, I am Grimm, and I'm, well, signing off.